We are the nerds. We are the nerds of the apocalypse.
He is much cuddlier in person than I thought. But that's recorded. We do look cozy. This is as cozy as I'll ever be. Can everyone hear this? Okay. All right. That sounds like it. Awesome. Hey, down in front. Can you be running through like that? All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Mike with Nerds of the Apocalypse, a local podcast group, and we do random things. One of the random things we do is help out City Comic Con and also the other local cons, and do moderating panels and random other things. I am here moderating, and we have our special guest, Freddie Williams II. Hello. I feel like you guys know more about him than I do, which is probably true. The first time I saw your artwork was, of course, the Batman Ninja Turtles cover, and I didn't really care about the story, mainly because I don't read a lot of comic books anymore, but I saw the cover, I'm like, what is going on with all of that?
Yeah, that was, what I was used to seeing quite often is people would respond like on social media or something and write, is this a real thing? Or they would write, hey, they should really do this. And my response is, we already did that. You know, like, I hope you like it. But that came about because I had heard about, Bobby Curnow, who's the editor for the IDW Ninja Turtles series, which is a really good series, by the way.
Yes, it is.
I had done like a couple of Ninja Turtle covers for that series, and I kept pestering him about wanting to do some more work on the Ninja Turtles, and he had said, we don't have anything right now, but maybe there might be a crossover with like the Turtles and some DC stuff. It's kind of hush-hush. And this was like 2+ years before I got the Batman Ninja Turtles gig. And so much time had passed, I just assumed that it had fallen apart. So that kind of stuff happens all the time in the comics world where something starts to happen and then like contract negotiations fall apart. So I thought, okay, it's not gonna work. But then we skip ahead to 2015. So he was telling me this stuff in 2013. Okay. So now 2015 rolls around and I see on Twitter, my editor named Jim Chadwick had tweeted something about a crossover between Green Lantern and Star Trek. And I was like, oh, okay, so that's an IDW and DC crossover. That must mean that the other crossover might be about to happen as well. So I took that opportunity to send Jim Chadwick an email and I said, you know, if you happen to do a Ninja Turtle Batman crossover, I would love it if you kept me in mind. And I linked him to some Ninja Turtle stuff I had done, and a Conan short story I had drawn that was done in a similar style, which is like a really detailed ink wash style. And he later told me I must have been psychic because they were actually talking about the artist they were choosing an artist that day in the office. So that's how I got the Batman Ninja Turtles gig. So I just happened to have really, really good timing that one time in my life, because I normally don't have good timing. So that was how I happened to stumble into it. So.
That is awesome. And I do remember that Star Trek Green Lantern because I did pick it up and that was an amazing miniseries.
And I did one cover for that as well. So that was like the ancillary prize as well, that I got to do a Star Trek Green Lantern variant cover for issue 1.
And now I need to go back and look at my books and see which one I got. If I haven't, I will find it. So we will be opening up some questions if you guys have any. So one thing I have to do is just get the ball rolling. It's like, where did you get this style? Because I looked at a lot of your other artwork, and not only do we really see the character, you define it just by so much shading around it. Because I definitely looked at, and I Googled, I do it. I'm not afraid to admit it. No, I'm not. I looked at the one for V for Vendetta, and that one stuck out so well to me because of the shading and how you really make the defining for his cave, how the mask looked like. How did you get this style going?
And that book that I actually drew was just called, there was a book that I did called Vendetta. That was a real long time ago. Not V for Vendetta, by the way. Okay, because that was David Lloyd. And then jumping ahead, basically in 2005, I got hired by DC Comics to draw the last couple issues of a book called Seven Soldiers, Mr. Miracle that Grant Morrison had wrote. And in that, the artist that had drawn it before me had this really open line style. So it was a very simplified, almost like what you'd see in a coloring book. And they had like 4 weeks for me to draw like an issue and a half. And that's, and this is pencil and ink, and that's pretty fast. And the open line style allowed me, I just kept in that same style, and after that they offered me to draw the book Robin, and they wanted that in a very open style as well. So why I'm saying all that stuff is, essentially I got hired to be a really fast artist, and I was so eager, and I work in several different styles anyway, I was just so eager and hungry to do whatever they needed that's what I stayed with for quite a while. Well, over that time I was developing other styles, like much more linear styles with a lot of cross-hatching, but also this ink wash thing where you basically use the same ink that we use to draw comic books. That's called India ink. It's an archive-safe ink, and you can dilute it with water, and then you get kind of a watercolory result with it. And I had read about other artists who did this. I didn't invent this or anything, and was using that style on commissions and just like covers and stuff like that. And that style is very laborious. It's very time-consuming to draw that way, but it's something that I was more interested in doing, that sort of art style, than the stuff I was doing for my regular DC work. And so that's what led me into working in that direction. So I did that Conan short story, which was 8 pages, and I liked it. I did that as a proof of concept, but it takes like almost twice as long for me to work in that style. And I let my editors know that, and they were like, yeah, let's try that. And it has a very, I think one of the reasons it works for the Ninja Turtles specifically is because the original Ninja Turtles were in black and white, and they had a very gritty sort of look to them in the Eastman Laird era of Turtles. And I'm very influenced by that, and I love that style, so it happens to have a real similar aesthetic at the end of it as well.
Okay. Any questions from the audience? Don't be shy.
If you could do another crossover, what would you do?
If I could do another crossover, what would I do? So far I've done a Batman Ninja Turtles, then I did He-Man and Thundercats, and then I did a sequel to Batman Ninja Turtles, and now I'm currently on Injustice, like the video game characters, crossing over with He-Man. So it's Injustice versus Masters of the Universe. And so I love doing crossover stuff. And I would love to do more Batman Ninja Turtles. I want to do like another 700 issues of that, which would take me the rest of my natural life, and I would die with the ink wash in my hand or something. But anything from the 80s, I'm an old man, so anything from anything from like the probably early to late 80s would be something that I'd be interested in. So stuff like Generation 1 Transformers, the 80s era of G.I. Joe, maybe some Silverhawks, some stop it, you're melting my heart already. Some crossover, yeah, I got the papers. But something with a crossover with all of those mixed into it would be, that would be outstanding.
You have a question?
Do you think Donatello is more intelligent than Bruce Wayne?
Do I think Donatello is more intelligent than Bruce Wayne? I think in his, if you look at specialties, yes, but I think he's more intelligent with the invention and that sort of stuff. I don't think he's as masterful like as a strategist. So if you get into specialty, I think, yeah, he has Bruce Wayne beat, but I think in more well-rounded intelligence than Bruce Wayne has him beat. And that's like just my opinion, of course. So if there's somebody online who eventually sees this because it's being recorded, I don't want them flipping their lid like going, that's not true because in issue 760, they specifically said that Bruce Wayne's IQ was blah, blah, blah. I have no idea. That's just my educated guess, I guess.
I definitely feel Donatello would be more techie. Donatello is definitely the Lucius Fox. If you said, who's smarter, Lucius Fox or Donatello's like, okay, now you have a contention right there.
I can see that. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
How long did it take for you to find your art style before you started?
How long did it take for me to find my art style before I started in the comics? I don't know if I have still. I feel like there's like 10 or 15 artists that I'm in love with their work, and then there's some X element of whatever it is that makes up my consciousness, and they're all kind of just floating around and jockeying for a bigger or smaller part in the artistic thing that I'm doing. So I'm not really for sure. There was a time whenever I was in high school that I really wanted to be a Jim Lee clone. So Jim Lee was like my favorite artist at the time, and he's still like one of my all-time favorites. But I was like trying to draw identically to him, where I got out a bunch of his art, which was X-Men and Wildcat stuff at the time, and like counted the number of lines he would draw in the brows and in the cheekbones. I'm not joking, and I made little style guides for myself that like drew him like a standard face from the front, 3/4 profile, a profile, and then even from the back profile past the ear, and drew like, I made note to myself, this is how many lines you put. I mean, it doesn't make sense if you drew the face closer to the camera. How many lines do you put in the face then? But over time, I found that it was really useful at the time to try to adhere myself to some artist because I didn't know what to do with myself. But after maybe a couple of months of working that way, I felt like it was more of a hindrance than a help. So anytime I don't know, just over time, like I'm now working in this ink wash style, but eventually I want to go back to doing pen and ink work with like lots of lines or just some feathering or something. And I don't know. I think anybody who's like trying to break into comics right now, the best thing is probably to look at a lot of influences and to start stealing from wherever you can get. So like even something as simple as like a bullet hole in the wall. Like if somebody had shot, bullets into this wall, the way you would draw that, like the sort of like cracks and stuff like that, even that kind of thing, if you're drawing it out of your own mind, it might look cool, but there's probably an even better artist that has drawn it in like the coolest way. So what you would have done is cool, but what they did was even cooler, and then you can be influenced by that. So, the way somebody drew clouds or something, you can just try to create almost like a hodgepodge of those things, and eventually something comes of it from your consciousness, and then you go in different directions. So, I don't know. I was rambling, but that's how I am. I'm a rambler.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What is the biggest appeal of doing a crossover of these characters?
What's the biggest appeal of doing crossovers with these types of characters? I don't know about the biggest appeal, but one of the big ones is, these, when I was 8, He-Man and Thundercats were like the coolest thing to me at that time. And then when I was about 12 or so, it was Batman and Ninja Turtles. So they kind of arrived in my mind, or my experience in those same eras. And I think that is what's enjoyable for me, is that at the time, that was the only thing I cared about in life was He-Man and Thundercats, and drawing, of course, too. But and I would draw them together and play with them together. And so it's getting to explore that same psychological space in my mind, the fandom of it, but also to try to make these characters inhabit the same sort of stylistic world. So for other people, I'm not sure what the coolest thing is, but for me, it's getting to kind of like visit with my 8-year-old self psychologically, but also get paid to do it, and to hopefully create some cool art that other people will like.
Yes, sir.
It might be a hard question, but do you have a favorite cover that you've done? Just something where you sat down and it's like, yep, that's exactly what I wanted, or like, that's totally me?
Do I have a favorite cover that I've drawn? Maybe not. It would be hard to put my finger on it, but right now what stands out to me is like, sometimes you work on something for 40 hours and it's the hardest thing you've ever drawn, and you're like, you feel like you're patting yourself on the back because you're like, it was a slog, but I got through it. Ooh, lucky me. And but nobody responds to it. But it's sometimes the more simple images are what grip people. But right now, maybe just because I'm thinking about childhood stuff. When I was a kid, my best friend was my cousin Chris. and he passed away a couple of years ago, but I did this tribute cover that was he and I, like, he was kind of like a brother to me. We spent so much time together and stuff, and there was this picture, a photo, like a Polaroid photo of me and him standing or sitting up on top of this like a clothesline pole. It's hard to describe, with our arm wrapped around each other. And I did a tribute image of that for this creator-owned book called Jonas Quantum that only 4 people on the planet ever bought. So we put a lot of work into this book, and I did a tribute of issue 4 of that. So maybe that one is like this real simple image, and it was like everything was white except for this. It was like a recreation of that Polaroid and stuff. So probably that one.
That was very sweet.
Oh, thanks.
My cousin's my best friend too.
In real life, or are you just messing with me?
No, I'm actually blown up. I feel the vibration. They're blowing me up because I have to bring a monitor to them. Because my little one, the littlest one, is playing World of Warcraft with them as a family, and I have an extra monitor that I need to bring to them. And they're like, "Are you done yet? Are you done yet?"
What are you doing? Go get that monitor. Just run off stage.
Basically, that's what they want me to do.
That's cool. More questions? More questions? I also worked at Hallmark Cards for 7 years, so even questions about drawing little bunnies or anything?
Gotta get work where you can get it, right?
Yeah, I loved it. It was the best 9-to-5 job I ever had. Yeah.
Well, I guess, yeah, you just said it's the best 9-to-5 job. I was saying, how does that compare to drawing comics versus drawing the cards, as far as, I guess, the work pace and workload?
Yeah, so how does it compare having like a cool 9-to-5 job like working at Hallmark Cards versus like the sort of fulfilling dream job of doing comic books? There's got to be some sort of like Venn diagram of like the number of hours worked in your dream job equals a lesser number of hours worked at a really good day job. So Hallmark wasn't as fulfilling, but in almost artistically fulfilling, but almost in every other way it was superior. So I was in a more creative environment because I was surrounded by people with all these different creative influences. It was just a 9-to-5 job, so I had a time I could just leave and then go home and not be working. But for comic books, I'm not saying this is a way to get sympathy. I'm drawing almost the entire time I'm awake, and almost every single day. And my wife, Kiki, luckily, we work in the studio together, and she works with me full time, so she's my business partner, and also she assists me on the art and stuff. So even with her work, with her help, I have to work almost the entire conscious moment of my life. So that's the big drawback, is working at home, although it's with my best friend, my wife. I basically, almost all my other relationships have suffered greatly, so not to get too real, but it's like I don't see my friends anymore because I just have to work all the time. But whenever I was
I want you to repeat that to them. I want you to repeat that. We can't see friends because we work a lot.
I like it that the gun lit up. The tip of it lit up. That's okay. Yeah, so it's just the difference of, I mean, I've always only ever wanted to draw comic books, so I feel way more passionate about that sort of a job, but more financially stable on the Hallmark side. So anyway. Just choose your passion or choose the more safe, long-term career thing. And my wife was we don't have kids, and my wife was very supportive and just like, this is what you want to do, you're getting a chance to do it, let's do it. So.
It's good to have a kind of partnership.
Oh yeah, I agree. Yeah, and that was back in 2005, so it's been quite a few years and things have gone well as well. So if things hadn't gone as well, maybe I would have to consider. More questions? Yeah, yes, sir.
Said Jim Williams, one of your heroes, have you met him and had any other experiences with artists?
Yeah, the question was, Jim Lee is one of my heroes. Have I had a chance to meet him or interact with him? So Jim Lee, for anyone who doesn't know, Jim Lee is the #1 best-selling comic book artist of all time. The X-Men #1 in 1991 or 2 sold 8 million copies, over 8 million copies. That is, wow, that's crazy. And he created Wildstorm Studios after that, and that was a place in La Jolla, which is in San Diego, which is a place place I wanted to work. It was like a studio where like 20 or 30 artists work together. Now he's even my boss because he's co-publisher at DC Comics. So talk about pressure if you meet this guy, right? And I have met him essentially for the first time about 5 times. So it's more like I don't work with him physically in the same space. And so whenever I meet him, I don't think he recognizes my face. So I'm over there going like, oh God, I'm about to meet him. And then I'm like, hi. And he's like, nice to meet you. I'm like, yes. 5 times, in my mind, it's weird because I've met him at San Diego cons. I even got to tour Wildstorm Studios and seen him at conventions and at DC after parties and stuff. So I haven't had much interaction with him, but I've had enough that I've met him for the first time 5 times. He's a nice guy, though. He's always very nice about it.
It just makes me want to remake 50 First Dates right there.
But 51st meetings with
Yeah.
Jim Lee.
He seems like a cool guy. He's down for it. So are there any times where because I know, speaking of Jim Lee, he does a lot of streams where he's doing his art.
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about ever doing that kind of thing as well?
I watch his streams, but no, not so much. Part of it is he's a way better artist than I am, and like part of whenever I was younger and I would draw, so I would look at this fantastic line art that other artists had drawn, this finalized line art, and I had the impression that whoever these amazing artists were, so Jim Lee or Barry Windsor Smith or Bernie Wrightson, they would draw without any undersketch. In my mind, this is how it worked, was that they would just know exactly, they would just start with a blank page, and they would know exactly what they needed to draw, and draw an eyeball in the middle of the page, and just draw the outside of the face, and draw the ears, they would just know exactly what they needed to draw. And so that's how I try to draw, and it gives you what's called perfection paralysis, where you're just so uptight that you don't really even want to start on the piece, because you're like, oh, where do I go? Because you think you can't make mistakes. And eventually I learned that that's not true, and everybody messes up all over the page, and you draw a million sketch lines, and then you clean them up and all this stuff.
You just made me feel better, by the way. I do the same thing in my Photoshop. And
Yeah,
I feel
you do it and then undo it, and you're constantly messing up. And I call this, when you're drawing on paper, I call this scribble sketching, and it's where you're just drawing very lightly and you don't carve into the paper and stuff. So that you can keep erasing over and over. And I try to tell all my nieces and nephews this so that they won't feel perfection paralysis. But I would feel embarrassed if other people saw how bad the pages start off, because you just have to start with the crudest, most basic BS sort of, like whenever I first read the script, the very first thought that pops into my mind, I draw it very crudely off to the side of the paragraph of the description of the panel. And those drawings are awful. And then when you first start drawing and constructing it on the page, they look terrible because they're just like weird scribbles that don't make a lot of sense. And maybe people would get value out of that because they would see it as, look how that weird, terribly drawn face eventually turned into hopefully a handsome face or something. But instead I would just I'd probably feel tight. Anytime I do demo drawings at the DC booth for San Diego Con and stuff, I feel that way the whole time. You just have to start with something, but that something usually looks terrible. So anyway, doing streams doesn't really appeal to me for that reason.
Okay.
I'll break you for my wallet.
Any questions?
Yes, sir.
What do you have more fun drawing, heroes or villains?
What do I have more fun drawing, heroes or villains? Probably villains, just because you can go a little more over the top. It depends on the villain, but especially somebody like the Joker, like you can really get exaggerated with the expressions. Whereas somebody like Batman, if you're drawing, usually they have to look stoic. You want them to look cool, but there's less margin for exploration. So if it's somebody like the Penguin or something, you can really get wacky with the proportions and facial expressions and that sort of thing. And then somebody like Joker, you can really contort the face to get some, hopefully creepy expressions. And you can't really go too far. I guess you could, but so villain's probably cooler to draw.
I'm pretty sure you can find 5 different layers of brooding.
it's there.
Yeah, there's like the subtlety, and usually with somebody like Batman, it's oftentimes for me, I want to make him look very like stout and have a lot of presence, but then the exploration more comes in trying to shadow him in a unique way or apply lighting to him in a unique way, because he's been drawn so many times that if you can find a unique way to light him, so like a 3-point light system versus like a single harsh contrasty light system, or an under lighting or something like that, or if you draw him in like a flashback, maybe you don't do any shadows, which will really make him stand out, because it's supposed to be like almost a psychological communication, but you're drawing him where he's just in shades of gray and I don't know, stuff like that. So looking for unique ways to approach it.
Different scripts from different writers, are they vastly on each other as far as how much detail the writers put in?
Yeah, different scripts from different writers, how much do they vary? The first scripts that I was working from at DC were written by Grant Morrison, and he, for anyone who doesn't know, he's like a self-proclaimed magician or sorcerer, like in real life, and so he would have like reasons for that but the point though is that he's very long form in his descriptions, but he makes clear you can change things. He'll sometimes write he'll have like a random thought. So in other words, he's writing kind of stream of consciousness. And so the sentence you just read has nothing to do with the panel, but it was more just a random thought that he had. And then he'll just say like, well, anyway, comma, and then go back to it. And that's actually really funny to read, because most other scripts are not like that. They're much more dry and professional and stuff. So that is probably the most long form I've read. Mark Waid is also, he's long form, although he's not as stream of consciousness. And then all the way to writers who have had a little bit more rapport with, who they know that they don't necessarily have to, like spell out all of the camera angles and stuff, and so they'll just say, pages 5 through 8, there's a fight. And then they'll just jump to the next page. So they've just handed it over to me, essentially. And that's like James Tynion, who's the writer for Batman Ninja Turtles. We have a very good rapport like that. He's a really nice guy. And then I've worked with J.T. Kroll, who's a writer who wrote Captain Atom. That was how he would work very much, like pages 5 through 10, there's a fight. And the only thing he's specializing is at the end of it, so-and-so gets his arm ripped off or whatever it is, And so you have to build a fight around that as the center point of action, but other than that, you have free reign. But every writer I've ever worked with will usually, at some point, either in our conversations, or in the email, in the script itself, they'll actually say, if you have a better idea, just go with that. And that's, working with, right now I've been working with Tim Seeley on the Injustice Masters of the Universe. He's very much like that as well, and sometimes he'll reply, like if I have another idea, he'll say, great, that makes me look smarter. Like that's because it looks like he had the idea, kind of. So anyway, there's a big variety. I've never worked with a writer who got too hung up about it. They're usually pretty open about it.
Who's your favorite writer that you've worked for?
I have to ask. I have to ask.
You can say all. I accept all.
Yeah, all. I'm gonna have to say no comment. That's like a weird question to answer. I think, the writer that I probably had the biggest psychological hurdle to overcome was probably Grant Morrison, just because he's a legendary writer and stuff like that. I guess I can say him. But I've had better creative back and forth with many other writers, so I don't know. Can't really answer it. It's like asking which of your 3 children is your favorite child? And the child is like right there, and they're like, which are you gonna say?
He can answer.
Yeah. You'll answer. No.
You got the camera going.
That's how I felt, yeah. Not on camera. No, I don't know.
Anyone have any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned how sometimes whenever they think of the script, they aren't very specific on the fight scenes and stuff. Have you ever had to give them
Yeah, in fight scenes or even other things, not sure if the writer would, or even sometimes editors, if they would be as flexible or as accepting with my solution. I have been nervous about it before, but so far it's been well received. Usually, and part of it is like I'll explain. I won't just send them a finished product at the end. I try very much to keep my editor and my writer in the loop. So when I get the script, I'll do what are called rough layouts for the entire issue. And the rough layouts are very crudely drawn things, but I've labeled everything clearly. And I'll even account for if the page was written to be 5 panels and I've combined 2 of the panels, I'll even make a note, this was panels 2 and 3 combined together. So I try to give them a full and thorough accounting of the changes I've made, and the reasons behind it. That way, if at that point they think that that's a bad move, they can tell me before I've moved into a more laborious or detailed drawing. And that's out of courtesy, but it's also to make sure I don't waste my time. Like if I don't want to get all the way to the end. And I think that the opportunity to voice an objection usually will soothe any initial knee-jerk reaction. So if you see something that's been changed and it's all the way done, you might feel a little cheated if you were the writer and you had a reason well, I kind of wanted it this way and I had a reason for it, and now you've made the change and it's too late to change it and all this stuff. So I just try to keep them in the loop very early and make sure that they see it at different stages of progression. So everybody's been good with that so far.
It's a really good work ethic, by the way.
Oh, thanks. That comes from working at Hallmark, actually. I worked in the licensing department for a couple of years. I was at Hallmark for over 7 years, but the last 2 years that I was there, I was working in the licensing department. And you had to go basically run everything by your vendors to make sure that they were on board with, everything really. But that was sort of the mentality that I had when I entered into comics. And I don't really know a lot of people in comics. I got in through just a portfolio review at the San Diego Comic-Con with DC Comics. And so it's not like I knew somebody who brought me in under their wing or anything. And when established pros have heard that that's how I work, they go, oh, you send them roughs? That's amazing to me. Or in other words, that they will just send them pencils or fully finished inks and they'll say, that way it's too late for them to make changes. They'll say it's a feature, I didn't want to give them a chance to say no, and that's cool if that works for them and everyone still pays them and wants to work with them, that's great if that works for them. But I would rather everybody be in agreement before I move to the next step, so on.
So if you want to be an artist, work at Hallmark. Get a good foundation right there.
It's a good place to work.
And we had a question. Oh, go ahead, Venus.
I know you said you always wanted in comics. Were there any other job opportunities that you wanted to do besides comics and Hallmark?
Yeah. What was your first name, by the way?
Phoenix.
That's Phoenix is your first name?
It's my legal name, yes.
That's cool.
Thank you.
Anyway,
You have to explain that that couldn't touch my mind.
Because I'm stuck with Freddie. That's such a basic, and you have Phoenix, I think that's neat.
I'm Mike, so.
It's okay. Okay, so you had asked, other than working in comics and working at Hallmark Cards, was there another job, or?
Were there any other job opportunities that you ever took or ever wanted?
Other jobs or job opportunities that I took that I wanted to. If I didn't do comics or never had the chance to or whatever, I would probably want to do 3D animation. I would want to do hand-drawn animation, or now that that's pretty much extinct, 3D animation. Those were both, still very artistic. Aside from that, I, for years, I worked in food service, I worked at Subway, I used to work at retirement homes as doing maintenance. I worked at an amphitheater doing maintenance and doing what's called flagging, which is where somebody is, everybody's driving into the parking lot, right, to where you needed to park. I hated all those jobs, but because when you said that you wanted to do, I was like, okay, I can't talk about that. But I think there's some value in that because, with my nieces and nephews that are now starting to get old enough where they maybe should start looking into getting some jobs and stuff, I think that there's some value in working some jobs that you just hate because you still need to learn to work with people in a friendly way and to be cooperative and still hit your goal even though the goal is not something you actually want to do. There's some character building stuff built into that, and hopefully they'll do that stuff too. But you know, I I don't know how many times I heard the joke, like when I was working at Subway, people would say, because I don't know if they still say, but like working at Subway, they used to say you're a sandwich artist. I don't know if you ever heard that, like maybe older people had heard that. It was like that was almost your position because you were supposed to be like building the sandwich in front of them, you know. And so my friends who were like, so you're an artist and now you're a sandwich artist, I don't know. Like that was the joke. But there was some, you know, and you're standing there with a stupid hat on. I don't know. So there's some value in that sort of stuff because you know, now I feel like I can break the ice with somebody who might be nervous to talk to me about comics or something, because it's like, look, man, I used to empty trash and, you know, clear off the tables and have to clean the trash can. The point though is that I'm just some guy, so just come up and talk to me. You know, it's no big deal.
That would make Jim Lee more approachable if he's like, yeah, I worked at Red Robin.
Yeah,
bus tables.
Yeah, yeah. He when I did meet him for the first time, the second time, he's very disarming and stuff. So he's a very small in stature guy, and I'm a much larger, taller guy than him. So as I was sitting, he was almost the same height as me. But we were signing at the DC booth at the same time, and my great aunt was there, and so she was watching. This is at the San Diego Comic-Con, and she had walked over to one of the DC handlers and said, Jim Lee is signing right next to my great nephew, and he would just love to meet Jim Lee. Could you please ask him to go over, but don't tell him I asked him. Don't tell him I asked him to go over there. And so that's how I got to meet him the second time. And he disarmed me basically by just saying, where are you from? And I said, well, I'm Kansas City, Missouri. I'm on the Missouri side. He was like, oh, I wrestled. I grew up in Missouri, and I wrestled. And I don't know, it was just, it wasn't the same thing as like the cleaning trash or, you know, doing Red Robin stuff, but he was a very disarming person. So, and that was the feeling, like he's the biggest comic book artist in the world and my boss, and he was still able to diffuse, and it's no big deal. There's no reason to feel intimidated. So that's a good lesson.
I love that. Jim Lee is a wrestler.
Yes. I heard stories that he used to, like, whenever him and the guys at Wildstorm, whenever they would have like an after hours party, that they would get to horse playing and stuff, and that he could wrestle guys way bigger than him. So, I'm not talking about WWF. I'm talking about like legit wrestling and stuff. So I thought that was really cool. Don't get too cocky. Yes, sir.
In the entirety of your consciousness, whenever I'm building something, I have to have background noise. What do you prefer when you're drawing? Do you need TV, music?
In the entirety of my consciousness? Wow. What a great way to start a question. Yeah, I'm actually a big fan, like we were talking about earlier, but I'm a real big fan of, there's a YouTube channel called Red Letter Media, and I'm a real big fan of those guys. Oh, there we go. I love those guys. And some of you maybe even have seen some of their reviews and not knew it was them, because the guy who created Red Letter Media is a guy named Mike Stocolassa, and he did these Plinkett reviews of the Star Wars prequels and some of the Star Trek movies, and that was how I first got introduced to their work. And I like how they put out a lot of content, and they're all really funny guys. Now it's not just Mike, there's like 4 or 5 guys who are the regulars, and then there's a couple of others who kind of go in and out, and I've had the pleasure of being on their show a couple of times as well. And I'm visually more recognized from the Red Letter Media stuff than, so we went to Universal Studios a couple of years ago, and there was like this big torrential downpour. We were in Florida, so it always does this like every, you know, it like rains really hard for 10 or 15 minutes. And so me and Kiki and our friend John like ran into this little eatery area that had this outside deck just because it had an awning. And while we were sitting there, like right next to us was the water, and there was all these fish that came up. The fish are conditioned, if they see humans, they'll come up because people feed the fish, like, you know, whatever they're eating. And so we didn't have anything to eat, but we just started picking up like scraps of like bread and stuff that was on the ground that people had like walked away, like pieces of French fries and pieces of like chips and stuff, and started feeding them. And after we'd been doing this for a couple of minutes, we're having a good time because there was like a lot of these fish, and there was a turtle that came up. Anyway, the point though is that after we'd been doing this, this guy came up And apparently he walked up and asked my wife, "Is that Freddie? Was he on Red Letter Media?" And she said, "Yeah." And he goes, and him and his wife are sitting there. They're like, "Oh, we've been standing over there for about 10 or 15 minutes. We wanted to meet you, but we saw you were busy." But it's like, we're busy feeding the fish from trash on the ground. And he was like nervous to come up and meet me. And I was like, "Oh, wow, that's so weird." I feel like he just saw, I felt embarrassed, like I'd been doing something he shouldn't have been seeing, like, because I was, I don't know. Anyway, like at our local Best Buy, there was a guy who came over at our local Target and said, "You're Freddie Williams, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I love you on Best of the Worst." And then he gave me a high five, and then as he was walking away, he said, "Freddie Williams shops at my Target." That's so weird. I was just on that internet show. It's a really cool show, but anyway, if you guys check it out, it's Red Letter Media, but I like to watch that. Anything with James Rolfe, who's the angry video game nerd, I dig his stuff, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in the background. If I'm working on roughs, I can't have anything that has like dialogue or storyline, so I'll listen to old heavy metal music that was stuff that was popular whenever I was in high school and long, long ago. That helps to keep my mind active, but in a different way that doesn't interfere with creativity. So it helps keep me kind of energized and stuff.
I have to ask, so far we've connected a lot.
Okay.
I mean, Silverhawks, He-Man. What's the old heavy metal music you're listening to?
Like Tool, Perfect Circle.
Stop, how my best friend, stop. That's it, you're done.
We can be best friends now?
We can be best friends.
Officially.
Any last minute questions? We're about to get wrapped up, get ready for the next panel. How about for the newbies who are all here for the next panel? Yes, sir.
Favorite Ninja Turtle, either growing up or currently?
My favorite Ninja Turtle is Leonardo. I've always been just drawn to leadership types. The person who would try to keep things together and working cohesively whenever everybody else is maybe introverted or kind of hot-headed or something like that. So, but you know, Leonardo's always been my favorite turtle. But Raphael is really fun to draw. He's just got a lot of angles that are really fun to draw. So. He's like the Wolverine of the turtles.
So to wrap this up, what inspiring words can you give some young artists out there?
Yes, I do have inspiring words for young artists. You're gonna face a lot of roadblocks along the way. So if you're just starting brand new, is to not put a lot of pressure on yourself that you need some sort of like high-tech, cool equipment. Just oftentimes just regular school supplies can be very useful. You just need like printer paper and pencils and a lot of erasers. And don't feel too pressured to make the right line the first time. Just to draw very lightly on the paper. Feel free to give yourself permission to mess up over and over and over. You can always throw the paper away, you can get a new piece. Because when I was younger, it was trying to draw the right line the first time. There was a special paper called Bristol board that these artists were using, which is like to help, it's just heavy cardstock that doesn't bleed as much when you're inking, but you don't need that to start off. Just use basic stuff and don't put a lot of pressure on yourself. And then inspiring words for people who are trying to break into the industry is that you're going to get a lot of no's, and you're just going to constantly be getting hit with no's, or you'll get something like a small independent job that you think is going to get, at least it'll get in print, and then you're happy about that, and then that falls apart, and then it never sees print. And to just not let that bug you too much. It's easy for me to say, but I also went through that. It's like, I hit a long series of no's. I have a big stack of rejection letters from Marvel and DC and Image from when I was in high school, and after that, a lot of the stuff I was trying to do, like short stories get printed or whatever, the publishing company is like, yes, we're gonna print this, and then the publishing company folds the next month because they're not making very good money. So you get demoralized, but it's important to just keep working past that. Oftentimes persistence will get you through all of those hurdles. It's just stick with it. I think somebody who's persistent and talented is more valuable in the long term than somebody who is a natural but who gives up easily. Like somebody who's a natural who it always just worked for them the first time. Normally, once they start encountering roadblocks, they might just get demoralized and say, no thanks, I'm tired of this. So being persistent is what will make you stand out, and of course you have to do your best, but don't give up and just keep pushing forward. That can work on a lot of things with writing or any other thing that you're aspiring for. Is just you're going to get a lot of no's, but you just need to get a couple people to start saying yes, then capitalize on that opportunity. Don't mess that up. Don't mess up those early opportunities, and then after that, more opportunities will start. Eventually, you get to the point where I've got a lot of people asking me to do things, and it's a lot of cool stuff. I just don't have the time. Now time is the big factor. So just keep persistent, and then eventually the work will start coming to you.
And also get your great aunt to introduce you to Jim Lee. That is very key.
She's really sweet.
Well, Freddie, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Thank you all.
This was a lot of fun. You guys have fun? I was calling us looking for a yes or a no, not a round of applause, but that works too. You can find Freddie over in the exhibitor section. Do you have a number?
I have an Artist Alley table, which is A46, but I'm not sure. Just look, I have a banner behind me that says Freddie Williams, so it's kind of tall, so that would be the right one.
And his wife is playing with a puppet, so you cannot miss that. All right, well, Freddie, thank you so much, and we will see you at your booth.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.